They say love is built on trust. But what happens when trust is a carefully constructed illusion? It wasn't her sudden late nights, the hidden credit card, or even the whispers from friends that unraveled my life. It was a letter. A single, crumpled letter, written in her handwriting, confessing a secret so vile it made me question everything I knew about love, loyalty, and myself. It started like any other Thursday morning. The smell of coffee wafted through the kitchen as I packed lunches for our 2 kids. My wife, Alina, breezed in, dressed in her usual sharp attire, her phone glued to her hand. She kissed me on the cheek, distracted as always. "Big day at work?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Always," she replied, not looking up. Our marriage was like this, routine, predictable, safe, or so I thought. Later that afternoon, as I tidied up the house, I noticed something unusual. A drawer in our study was slightly ajar. Normally, Alina kept everything meticulously organized, almost obsessively so. Curious, I opened it. Inside was a plain white envelope, partially crumpled as if it had been hastily shoved in. My name was written on the front in Alina's handwriting. My heart raced as I pulled it out, sensing something significant about its secrecy. The envelope wasn't sealed, and inside was a single sheet of paper. The words, scrawled in Alina's elegant script, made my stomach drop. "I never meant for this to happen, but I can't keep living this lie. There's someone else. I need to tell you, but I'm scared of what it will do to us. Please forgive me." I read the note 3 times, hoping I had misunderstood. But the meaning was clear. My wife was confessing to an affair. The room spun as I sat down, clutching the letter. This couldn't be happening. Our life wasn't perfect, but it was solid. At least I thought it was. The idea of Alina with someone else felt surreal, like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. By the time Alina came home that evening, I had rehearsed a dozen confrontations in my head. But when she walked through the door, smiling and chatting about her day, I froze. "Hey," she said, dropping her bag on the counter. "What's for dinner?" "Pasta," I replied, my voice tight. She didn't notice my tone or the tension in the air. As the kids filled the house with their usual noise, I realized I couldn't confront her. Not yet. I needed more information. Over the next few days, I paid closer attention to Alina. Her phone, always within reach, seemed to buzz more often. She laughed at messages she never shared with me and became irritable when I asked about her day. "Just work stress," she said, brushing off my questions. But it wasn't just her behavior that raised alarms. There were tangible signs too. A receipt for a luxury hotel tucked into her purse, a bottle of expensive cologne I'd never seen her wear. Each discovery was a dagger to the heart, but I told myself there could be innocent explanations. Maybe the hotel was for a work event, maybe the cologne was a gift from a client. But deep down, I knew better. Unable to take the uncertainty any longer, I decided to do something I never thought I'd do. I hired a private investigator. The decision felt wrong, invasive, and desperate. But the thought of confronting Alina without solid evidence terrified me. What if I accused her and she denied everything? What if I was wrong? The investigator, a no-nonsense woman named Clara, assured me she would handle everything discreetly. "You'll have your answers within a week," she promised. That week felt like an eternity. I went through the motions of daily life, pretending everything was fine while secretly dreading the investigator's call. When Clara finally called, her tone was grave. "We need to meet," she said. I met her at a quiet cafe, my heart pounding. She slid a folder across the table, her expression unreadable. "What's this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Proof," she said simply. Inside the folder were photos, Alina smiling and laughing, walking hand in hand with a man I didn't recognize. There were timestamps, locations, even receipts for dinners and trips they'd shared. "She's been seeing him for at least 6 months, Clara said. "I'm sorry." I stared at the photos, my chest tightening with every image. The evidence was irrefutable. Alina wasn't just having an affair. She had built an entire relationship with someone else, complete with dates, gifts, and secrets. But what hurt the most wasn't the betrayal. It was the realization that she had been so happy with him. Happier, it seemed, than she ever was with me. As I drove home that night, the weight of her betrayal pressed down on me like a boulder. I couldn't escape the images of her with him, the sound of her laughter in the photos. Something had to change. That night, I placed the letter back in the drawer, exactly where I'd found it. I wanted Alina to know that I knew. I wanted her to feel the same dread, the same uncertainty that had consumed me. For the next few days, I watched her carefully. She seemed tense, her smiles forced, her movements distracted. She knew the letter was gone, but she didn't say a word. It became a silent war, each of us waiting for the other to break. But when the confrontation finally came, it wasn't at all what I expected. The tension in the house was palpable, like the quiet before a storm. Alina's demeanor shifted over the days following her discovery of the missing letter. She moved through the house like a shadow, her usually confident air replaced by nervous energy. Every conversation was stilted, every glance heavy with unspoken words. I knew the confrontation was inevitable, and I had rehearsed what I wanted to say 100 times. But when it finally happened, it wasn't on my terms. It was late in the evening when Alina finally approached me. The kids were asleep, and the house was eerily quiet. She stood in the doorway of the living room, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, my heart pounding. She sat down across from me, her gaze fixed on her hands. "You found the letter," she said finally. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I replied, my voice steady. A silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Finally, she looked up at me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I didn't want you to find out like this." "How did you want me to find out, Alina?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "Were you planning to tell me at all, or were you just going to keep lying until it didn't matter anymore?" She flinched at my words, and for a moment I felt a pang of guilt. But then I remembered the photos, the hotel receipts, the months of deception, and my anger surged again. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't plan for this to happen. It just did." "It just did," I repeated bitterly. "That's your excuse? You accidentally had an affair." She shook her head, her tears finally spilling over. "It wasn't like that," she said. "I was lonely. We were drifting apart and I felt invisible. He made me feel seen, understood." "Don't put this on me," I snapped. "Don't you dare act like this is my fault." "I'm not," she insisted. "I'm just trying to explain how I felt. It wasn't about you, it was about me." Her words stung more than I wanted to admit. I had noticed the distance between us, the way we had fallen into routines and stopped making an effort. But I had always thought it was something we could fix. Apparently, she had thought otherwise. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice cold. Alina hesitated, her eyes darting away. "Does it matter?" "Yes," I said firmly. "It matters." She sighed, her shoulders slumping. "His name is Ian. We met at a conference 6 months ago. It started as just talking. I didn't mean for it to become more." "More," I said bitterly. "What does that mean? Dinner? Hotels? Or were you planning a whole new life with him?" Her silence was all the answer I needed. As the anger boiled over, I pulled out the photos Clara had given me and threw them onto the coffee table. "Were these just talking too?" I demanded. Alina's eyes widened as she looked at the pictures. Her face went pale, and for a moment she looked like she might be sick. "You hired someone to follow me?" "What else was I supposed to do?" I shot back. "You were lying to me, sneaking around. I needed the truth." She looked down, her hands trembling. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Sorry doesn't fix this," I said. "Sorry doesn't erase what you've done." As I stared at her, waiting for her to say something, anything, that could make sense of the situation, she dropped a bombshell that I never saw coming. "There's something else," she said quietly, her voice barely audible. My stomach churned. "What?" She hesitated, tears streaming down her face. "I think I'm pregnant." The room spun as her words sank in. "You think you're pregnant?" I repeated, my voice shaking. She nodded, her face crumpling. "I don't know for sure, but I missed my last period. I was going to take a test, but what?" I demanded, my voice rising. "You're afraid it's not mine?" Her silence was deafening. "You don't even know, do you?" I said, standing up and pacing the room. "You don't know if the child you're carrying is mine or his." "I didn't plan for this to happen," she sobbed. "That doesn't make it any better," I shouted. "Do you have any idea what you've done? What you've put me through?" I stood there, staring at the woman I had once loved more than anything in the world, and felt nothing but anger and heartbreak. The life we had built together, the life I thought was real, was a lie. "I need some air," I said, grabbing my coat. "Wait," she said, standing up. "Please, we need to talk about this." "I can't even look at you right now," I said, my voice cold. "You've destroyed everything, Alina. I don't even know who you are anymore." I left the house, slamming the door behind me, and drove aimlessly through the city, my mind racing. The woman I had trusted, the mother of my children, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. And now there was a chance she was carrying another man's child. Driving through the city that night, my emotions swung violently between anger, despair, and disbelief. The woman I had built a life with, the woman I trusted with everything, had not only betrayed me, but now carried a secret that threatened to shatter what little remained of our bond. I parked in a quiet spot by the river, the distant hum of the city, a soothing counterpoint to the storm raging inside me. My phone buzzed repeatedly, calls and texts from Alina, no doubt, but I ignored them. I wasn't ready to face her, not yet. I needed answers, but more than that, I needed clarity. Who was Alina, really? And what else had she been hiding from me? The next morning, my phone buzzed with a call from Clara, the private investigator. "I found something else," she said, her voice careful. "What is it?" I asked, my heart sinking. "Financial records," she said. "Your wife has been making withdrawals from an account you probably don't know about, significant amounts over the past 6 months." I gripped the phone tighter. "What kind of account?" "It's registered in her name only," Clara explained. "It seems to be tied to Ian, the man she's been seeing. They've used it for trips, gifts, even some payments I couldn't trace. I thought you'd want to know." My hands trembled as I ended the call. It wasn't just an affair. Alina had been siphoning money from our shared life, using it to fund her secret one with Ian. I returned home that afternoon, determined to find the truth. Alina was in the kitchen, her eyes red and puffy from crying. "We need to talk," she said, her voice trembling. "Not yet," I replied coldly. "First, I want you to tell me about the account." Her face went pale. "What account?" "Don't lie to me," I snapped. "The one in your name, the one you've been using to pay for hotels, trips, and God knows what else." She looked down, her silence confirming everything. "Do you have any idea how humiliating this is?" I said, my voice rising. "Not only have you been cheating on me, but you've been stealing from me, from our family, to fund your little fantasy with him." "I wasn't stealing," she said defensively. "It was my money." "Our money," I corrected. "We built this life together, Alina. Every penny in this house was supposed to be for us, for our kids, not for your affair." Her response opened a floodgate of revelations. Over the next hour, she admitted to more than I thought possible. The affair hadn't started 6 months ago. It had been going on for nearly a year. Ian wasn't just a fling. He was someone she had considered leaving me for. The pregnancy, though uncertain, was likely a result of her relationship with him. Each confession felt like a stab to the heart, but the worst part was her demeanor. She didn't seem remorseful, at least not for the affair. Her apologies were mechanical, empty, as if she was going through the motions without truly understanding the depth of her betrayal. "Why are you even still here?" I finally asked. "If you're so in love with him, why not just leave?" She looked away, her silence more damning than any response. That evening, Clara called again, this time with information that sent chills down my spine. "I dug a little deeper into Ian," she said. "He's not who he says he is." "What do you mean?" I asked, my stomach tightening. "He's a con artist," Clara explained. "He's been involved in multiple scams, targeting women in particular. He builds relationships, gains their trust, and then drains them financially. Alina isn't the first." The room spun as I processed her words. Alina hadn't just betrayed me. She had been manipulated, used by a man who saw her as nothing more than a mark. "Does she know?" I asked. "I doubt it," Clara replied. "But if you want my advice, you should tell her. She needs to know what she's dealing with." When I told Alina about Ian, her reaction was not what I expected. Instead of shock or anger, she laughed bitterly. "Of course," she said, shaking her head. "That's just my luck." "Your luck?" I asked incredulously. "You brought this on yourself, Alina. You let this man into your life, into our lives, and now you're surprised that he's not who you thought he was." "I didn't know," she said, her voice breaking. "I thought he loved me." Her words sent a fresh wave of anger through me. "Love," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Do you even know what that word means? Because it sure as hell doesn't look like what you've done to me." The next day, as I tried to piece together what to do next, there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, I found myself face to face with Ian. "You've got some nerve," I said, my fists clenching. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said, raising his hands. "I just want to talk." "You've got 2 minutes," I said, stepping outside and closing the door behind me. Ian's demeanor was calm, almost smug. "I think we both know how this ends," he said. "Alina's not happy here. She's coming with me." "Like hell she is," I snapped. "You've already taken enough from her, and from me." He smirked. "I didn't take anything she didn't offer willingly. Maybe if you'd been a better husband, she wouldn't have needed me." Before I could stop myself, I punched him square in the jaw. He stumbled back, his smirk replaced by a look of shock. "This isn't over," he said, wiping blood from his lip, "not by a long shot." As I watched him walk away, something clicked. This wasn't just about Alina's betrayal or Ian's manipulation, it was about control. Ian wasn't just after Alina's money, he wanted to destroy her life completely. And in the process, he was trying to take mine down with it. I went back inside, my resolve hardening. If Ian thought he could waltz into my life and ruin everything, he was about to learn how wrong he was. The weight of the situation was suffocating, but as I stood there, staring at the empty street where Ian had disappeared, a clarity began to form. I wasn't just a victim in this mess. I had the power to turn things around. Ian thought he could waltz in and destroy my family, but I wasn't going to let him. I'd spent too long being passive, hoping things would fix themselves. Now I needed to take control. I spent the next few days quietly gathering information, taking notes, and making plans. Clara had already provided valuable intel on Ian, but now I needed to focus on what I could do to protect myself, my family, and most importantly, the life I had spent years building. Alina's betrayal had shaken me to my core, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized I couldn't just fix the surface issues. I needed to address the deeper betrayal, her willingness to throw away everything for someone who was only using her. I called a lawyer, one who specialized in high-conflict divorces. This wasn't going to be a simple split. With Ian's involvement, the stakes were higher than I'd ever imagined. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Emily, walked me through the process. "Given the situation with Ian and the financial discrepancies, we can ask for full custody of the kids and secure your assets," she said. But we need to act quickly. If Ian is as dangerous as you say, you need to protect your family immediately. I scheduled the meeting with Alina the next morning, knowing it would be the most difficult conversation I'd ever have. When I arrived at the house, Alina was sitting in the living room, her eyes swollen from crying. She looked up at me, her expression one of regret and fear. "I know what you're thinking," she said quietly, "but I never wanted any of this. I never wanted to hurt you." I sat down across from her, my heart heavy with a mix of anger and disbelief. "You didn't just hurt me, Alina. You destroyed us. You tore everything apart." She reached for my hand, but I pulled back. "You don't get to pretend like this is all a mistake. You chose him. You let him into our lives, into our family, and now I have to fix everything because of your choices." Alina's face crumpled, and for the first time I saw the depth of her regret. "I never wanted this to get out of hand," she said. "It started so innocently. I thought I could keep it from you, keep you safe." "Safe?" I repeated. "You think keeping secrets from me kept me safe?" She didn't respond, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I've been to see a lawyer," I said, my voice cold. "We're filing for divorce." Alina looked up, her eyes wide with shock. "What?" "You're not the woman I married," I said. "I can't live like this anymore. I can't trust you. I can't be in a relationship where I'm constantly wondering who you're hiding from me." Her face twisted in pain, but there was nothing left to say. "I'm also seeking full custody of the kids," I added, my voice firm. "You've made your choices, and I'm going to make mine. They need stability, not this chaos." Alina opened her mouth to argue, but she stopped herself, realizing I wasn't backing down. "I don't want to lose the kids," Alina said, her voice desperate. "Please don't do this. I made a mistake, but I can fix it. We can fix it." I shook my head. "This isn't about fixing it, Alina. This is about protecting them. You've put us all at risk. I don't know what's going to happen with Ian, but I know I can't trust you anymore." Her face paled. "What do you mean, with Ian?" I leaned in, my gaze unwavering. "He's not just some guy you've been seeing, Alina. He's dangerous. And if you think he's going to walk away from this without consequences, you're wrong." Alina's eyes widened as the realization dawned. "What have you done?" she whispered, her voice shaky. "I'm doing what's necessary," I said, standing up. "You can go with him if you want, but you'll lose everything. And if you think for 1 second I'm going to let him take my kids, you're out of your mind." Alina stood up, her eyes wild with panic. "You're threatening me?" she asked, her voice rising. "No," I said, my voice calm. "I'm trying to keep our family together. You've made your choices and now I'm making mine. You can fight this in court, but I won't back down." She stood there for a moment, her hands shaking as she processed the weight of my words. Finally, she nodded slowly. "I never wanted any of this." "I know," I said, my heart heavy with sadness. "But you made your choices, and now so have I." The next few days were a blur of legal meetings, paperwork and strategizing. I filed for divorce, securing the custody papers with the help of Emily. Alina, though devastated, didn't fight me on the custody arrangements. I suspected Ian had already begun to distance himself from her, seeing the writing on the wall. But the real battle was just beginning. As I prepared for the upcoming court hearings, I realized the emotional toll this was taking on me. The anger was still there, but it was tempered by something deeper, a sense of betrayal I couldn't fully comprehend. Every conversation I had with Alina felt like a tug of war. She wanted to keep me, to keep the family, but she was still clinging to the hope that Ian would somehow come back and fix things. The worst part was watching her hold on to that fantasy, knowing how deeply she had hurt me. As the days dragged on, I received an unexpected call from Clara. "I need to meet with you," she said. "What's going on?" I asked, my heart skipping a beat. "There's something you need to know about Ian," she said, her voice filled with urgency. When we met later that evening, Clara revealed a shocking detail. Ian wasn't just after Alina. He had been using her to get to me. His real target was my business, my reputation. He had been planting seeds, using Alina's affair as leverage to manipulate me into making financial mistakes. "He's been setting you up from the beginning," Clara explained. "He wants to ruin you, financially and personally." The realization hit me like a freight train. Ian hadn't just been a lover, he had been a puppet master, pulling strings and setting up a carefully orchestrated attack. The weight of Clara's revelation hung over me like a dark cloud. Ian wasn't just some jealous lover trying to stake a claim on my wife. He was far more dangerous. He had been manipulating the entire situation, using Alina's affair as a smokescreen to execute a carefully planned financial attack against me. It wasn't just about Alina, it was about power, money, and revenge. Ian had targeted me from the start, using Alina as the entry point, and I had walked straight into his trap. The rage I felt wasn't just for the betrayal of my marriage, it was for the audacity of someone trying to take everything I had built. As I sat with Clara in that dimly lit cafe, trying to digest everything she had revealed, a sense of clarity began to emerge. If Ian thought he could break me, ruin my business, and destroy my family with this elaborate scheme, he had underestimated me. "I need everything you have on him," I said, my voice firm. "Every piece of evidence, every transaction, every connection. We're going to expose him before he can do any more damage." Clara nodded, her face set with determination. "I've been compiling everything I can, but Ian's a ghost. His financials are well hidden, and he's been playing a game of shadows. I'll need more time, but we're getting close." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what lay ahead. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about protecting my future, protecting my kids, and reclaiming control. "Do whatever it takes," I said. "Just make sure he doesn't see us coming." Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into the fight, focusing on building a case that would destroy Ian and expose everything he had done. I gathered every shred of evidence, hired a financial expert to trace Ian's movements, and kept a careful watch on Alina. She still seemed emotionally torn, desperate for things to go back to how they were, but I knew it was too late. She had made her choices, and now I was making mine. I had to shut Ian down completely before he could make his next move. But the more I learned, the more I realized how deep Ian's connections ran. He wasn't just a man playing games with my marriage. He was a part of a network of people who would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. I knew I was up against something far bigger than I had anticipated. One evening, as I was going over the evidence with Clara, I received an unexpected visitor. Ian showed up at my door, his demeanor calm, even confident, like he had nothing to fear. "Thought you might be expecting me," he said with a smug grin. "You're making quite a mess of things, aren't you?" "What do you want, Ian?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "I want to stop the game before it gets too ugly," he said, stepping into the foyer. "But if you're going to keep digging, I can promise you things are only going to get worse for you and for Alina." I narrowed my eyes. "You don't get to threaten me. You've already taken everything you can from her, but you're not touching my business, and you're sure as hell not touching my kids." Ian chuckled darkly. "You're already in too deep, my friend. I've already set the wheels in motion. You're going to lose everything, family, finances, everything. And then, maybe, just maybe, you'll understand what it feels like to have everything ripped away." His words hit harder than I wanted to admit. He wasn't just bluffing, he had something big in motion. And that was the moment I realized the full extent of his plot. As Ian left, a sense of urgency flooded my chest. I needed to act fast. Ian wasn't just playing a game anymore, he was playing for keeps. But this time, I wouldn't be the one caught off guard. I gathered Clara and a few trusted allies to discuss our next steps. "We need to hit him where it hurts," I said, my voice cold with resolve. "Expose his financial dealings, his connections, everything. He thinks he's in control, but he's not. He has no idea what's coming. Clara nodded. I've got the evidence we need, but we need to move quickly. If we wait too long, Ian will pull the trigger on whatever he's been planning. I nodded, feeling the adrenaline surge through me. It was time to turn the tables, to expose Ian for what he truly was. A con artist, a manipulator, and a man who would stop at nothing to destroy me. The next week was a blur of meetings with lawyers, investigators, and financial experts. We dug into Ian's background, uncovering even more layers to his deception. He wasn't just trying to ruin me. He had been systematically targeting successful men, using their relationships as a gateway to exploit them. With Clara's help, we connected the dots. Ian had used Alina as a pawn to access my business, siphoning money from accounts, manipulating contracts, and even influencing some of my key partnerships. It wasn't just an affair, it was a financial takeover, an attempt to bring me down. And now, armed with all the evidence, we were ready to make our move. We went public with everything we had: press releases, legal filings, and a detailed exposé of Ian's manipulation. Every lie, every transaction, every piece of information was laid bare for the world to see. Ian didn't expect the backlash. He thought he could intimidate me into submission, but now the tables had turned. His financial dealings were exposed, his reputation was in tatters, and Alina, though devastated, began to see the truth of what had happened. I wasn't the only one Ian had betrayed, but in the end, it was my resilience, my determination to protect what I loved, that gave me the power to expose him for who he truly was. As Ian's empire began to crumble, I thought the battle was over. But just when I thought I could breathe again, a final twist emerged. A lawyer's letter arrived, addressed to me. I opened it slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. Inside was a simple message. You have no idea who you've been messing with. Ian was just a pawn. This isn't over. I froze, my mind racing. Who was behind Ian, and what else was waiting in the shadows? The letter sat on the table in front of me, its message haunting me. You have no idea who you've been messing with. Ian was just a pawn. This isn't over. My heart raced as I stared at the letter. The walls felt like they were closing in. Ian was only the tip of the iceberg. The real danger was yet to come, and the question that kept echoing in my mind was, who was behind it all? I couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in my stomach. I'd thought I was done with Ian, thought I had exposed all his secrets and brought his manipulation to light. But this letter made it clear. Ian was just a small player in a much larger game. I called Clara immediately, my voice shaky with urgency. I need you to dig deeper, I said. Ian wasn't working alone. There's someone else pulling the strings, and I need to know who it is. I've been digging, but you're right. Something doesn't add up, Clara replied. Ian's financials are clean on the surface, but there's a trail that leads off the grid. I'll get back to you as soon as I have something concrete. While I waited for her to get back to me, I couldn't sit still. The looming threat wasn't just Ian, it was whoever was behind him. Whoever had set this trap in motion long before I had even realized. The days dragged by, and every minute felt like a ticking clock. Then I received an unexpected phone call from Emily, my divorce lawyer. I've been reviewing some of the documents you gave me, she said. There's something I need to bring to your attention. We've traced some of Ian's transactions, and the pattern is worrying. It's not just money. There's a pattern of power, of influence. What do you mean? I asked, my pulse quickening. Look at this, she said, sending me a series of files. Ian's financial activity isn't just related to your business. It's tied to a group of influential individuals, people with connections to your company. I opened the files, scrolling through the names and companies listed, and then I saw it. A name I recognized from years ago, Dominic Grant. Dominic Grant was a former business associate, someone I had once trusted. He had been a partner in some of my earlier ventures, but we had parted ways amicably when his business practices began to raise red flags. I hadn't thought about him in years, but now his name appeared in Ian's financial network. I leaned back in my chair, a wave of realization washing over me. Dominic was the puppet master. He had used Ian to target me, to undermine my business and my family, and I had never even seen it coming. I immediately called Clara. "I know who's behind this," I said, my voice shaking with fury. "It's Dominic Grant. He's the one who's been pulling the strings." "Are you sure?" Clara asked, her voice sharp with concern. "I know it," I said firmly. "He's the one who has been trying to take me down from the inside. Ian was just a tool. It was always Dominic's plan." The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. Dominic had always been obsessed with power, with control. When our business relationship had ended, I had assumed it was because of his unethical practices. But now I realized it wasn't about that. It was about revenge. Dominic had been plotting against me for years, using his connections to sabotage my company. Ian was his pawn, a man who had gained Alina's trust and used her to infiltrate my life. Dominic knew my weaknesses and had used them to destroy everything I had worked for. Clara and I worked late into the night, connecting the dots. Dominic's reach was vast, his network stretching across multiple industries. If I wanted to take him down, I would need to expose him publicly. But doing so would be dangerous. He had the resources to retaliate in ways I couldn't even imagine. I knew I had to confront Dominic, face to face. I couldn't just wait for the law to do its work. I had to take matters into my own hands. I arranged a meeting at a private location, far from any prying eyes. Dominic arrived, dressed in his usual sharp suit, his demeanor confident, almost arrogant. When he saw me, his expression shifted from casual to guarded. "You're still trying to play this game, aren't you?" he said, his voice low. "You should have left well enough alone, my friend." "Cut the crap, Dominic," I said, my voice steady but filled with rage. "I know everything. I know you've been behind this the whole time. Ian was just your puppet, and Alina was your pawn." He raised an eyebrow, his smirk fading. "You think you can stop this? You think you can bring me down?" "I already have," I said, sliding the documents across the table. "I have everything I need to expose you. Your connections, your dirty deals, everything. You're done." His face darkened as he scanned the documents. For a moment, I thought he might actually back down, but then he leaned back, his eyes glinting with a dangerous light. "You think you've won?" he sneered. "You have no idea what's coming. If you think I'll let you walk away from this without consequences, you're gravely mistaken." Just as I thought I had him cornered, he said something that sent a chill down my spine. "You've been too focused on me," he said, his tone mocking. "You should have been watching your own back." Before I could react, the door behind me opened, and a figure stepped in, someone I never expected to see. Alina. She walked into the room, her face pale but determined. "You think you've exposed everything, don't you?" she said quietly, her eyes not meeting mine. "What the hell are you doing here?" I demanded, my voice trembling with shock. "Ian wasn't the only one you should have been worried about," she said, her voice strangely calm. "I've been working with Dominic this entire time. I knew what I was doing when I betrayed you. I knew exactly what I was getting into." The world tilted beneath me. Alina, the woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted more than anyone else, had been part of this all along. She had been manipulating me from the start, helping Dominic bring me down. The room felt like it was closing in on me as Alina stood there, her eyes avoiding mine. Her presence felt surreal, like a cruel twist of fate. She was supposed to be the one person I could trust, the one person who could never hurt me. And yet, here she was, standing beside the man who had spent months trying to destroy me. "Alina, what the hell is going on?" I demanded, my voice shaky with disbelief. "What do you mean you've been working with him?" She didn't look at me as she spoke. "I didn't want it to happen like this," she said, her voice so eerily calm that it only made the betrayal hit harder. But Dominic made me an offer. I thought I could keep you and my life intact, but I was wrong. I was weak. Weak. The word echoed in my head, bitter and cold. She wasn't just weak, she was complicit. She had chosen him over me, over our family. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. The woman I had shared everything with had planned, schemed, and sold me out. Alina's eyes finally met mine, and for the first time since she'd walked into the room, I saw a flicker of guilt. Just a flicker. It started after Ian came into my life, she explained quietly, her voice barely audible. He convinced me that you didn't need me anymore. He said you were already slipping away from me, emotionally and physically, and I believed him. Believed him, I repeated, my chest tightening. How could you believe that? You think I've been the one pulling away from you. You've been lying to me for months. Alina's shoulders slumped and she closed her eyes, as if trying to shut out the weight of the truth. It wasn't like that. Ian knew what to say. He knew how to make me feel special, needed. And when I found out how much Dominic wanted to take you down, I saw it as a way out, a way to get what I thought I deserved. I shook my head in disbelief. So you were just a pawn to Dominic's game. You helped him manipulate me, break apart our family, because you thought you deserved more? She nodded slowly, tears welling up in her eyes. Yes, I wanted to feel valued again. I wanted to feel wanted. Her words felt like a slap, each one more painful than the last. The woman I had sacrificed everything for, the woman I had built my life around, had thrown it all away for the hollow promise of attention and validation from a man like Dominic. I turned to Dominic, who had been watching us with a cold smirk. So this is what you've been doing all along, huh? I said, my voice dripping with contempt. You used her to get to me. You used her weaknesses, her insecurities, and you played her like a fiddle. You didn't care about her. You just wanted to ruin me. Dominic's smirk faded, but his eyes remained cold. It was never about her, really, he said, his voice casual. She was just a means to an end. You, on the other hand, were my real target. I needed you to fall, and I needed your business to crumble. She just helped me get closer. My fists clenched as the full weight of his manipulation hit me. Alina, my wife, had been an accessory to his scheme, a tool used to break me down. My rage grew, but so did my sense of resolve. I wasn't going to let him win. I wasn't going to let either of them take everything I'd built. I looked back at Alina, my voice low and steady. I don't even know who you are anymore. You've helped him destroy our lives, and you think you can just walk away from this? I didn't want to destroy our life, she whispered, her voice breaking. But I can't fix this now. I've done too much. I've gone too far. You can't undo what you've done, I said, my eyes narrowing. But you can still help me stop Dominic. You can still help me take him down. Alina's head snapped up, her eyes wide. What? How? How could I possibly help you after everything I've done? I have the evidence, I said. We have the financial transactions, the communications between you and Ian, and the connections between Dominic and all of this. We can bring him down, expose him for the fraud he is. But I need your help. Alina hesitated, her face pale. I don't know if I can do that. You're the only one who can, I said, my voice firm. If you want to make this right, this is the only way. She took a deep breath, her expression torn. And if I help you, what happens to me? What happens to us? I didn't have an answer for her. There were no guarantees. But I knew one thing for certain. If I didn't act, if I didn't take control of the situation, Dominic and Alina would have won. You'll have to live with the consequences of your actions, I said quietly. But you'll also have the chance to stop the man who's been controlling you, manipulating you. You'll have the chance to save what's left of your dignity. She nodded slowly, her eyes filled with both fear and determination. Okay, I'll help you. With Alina's help, we began to put the pieces together. The plan was risky, but it was our only shot at bringing Dominic down. We contacted the right people, lawyers, financial experts, and investigators who could verify the evidence we had. The more we dug, the more we uncovered about Dominic's illegal dealings. He wasn't just targeting me, he was running a complex network of fraud and embezzlement, using people like Alina as pawns in his game. We built a case that would expose him for who he truly was, a criminal mastermind who had used everyone around him for his own gain. But even as I moved forward, I couldn't shake the feeling that Dominic wasn't done. He had already proven that he would stop at nothing to destroy me. And now that he knew I was coming after him, I feared he might be planning his next move. The plan was set. Alina and I had gathered everything we needed to take Dominic down. The evidence was overwhelming: financial records, emails, witness testimonies. And I felt a growing sense of certainty that we could finally bring him to justice. But even with all the pieces in place, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into a trap. Dominic wasn't a man who would go down quietly. I had one shot at this, and if I failed, everything, my family, my business, my life, would be lost forever. We arranged to meet Dominic at a secluded location outside the city. I wanted to confront him face to face before going public with everything we had. This would be our final confrontation. Alina would be with me, ready to testify and expose everything. As we drove to the location, Alina remained silent, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I could feel the tension between us, the unspoken weight of the past, the betrayal, the lies. But at that moment, I couldn't afford to think about it. I had to focus on the task at hand. When we arrived, Dominic was already waiting for us. He was standing next to a sleek black car, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp, calculating. The moment he saw us, his lips curled into that same smug smile. "You should have stayed out of this," he said as we approached, his voice dripping with disdain. "You've made a mistake, and now you're going to pay for it." "You've been playing a dangerous game, Dominic," I said, my voice steady. "But it's over. Your empire of lies is falling apart. You're not going to get away with this." He laughed, the sound echoing in the quiet night. "You really think you can stop me? You're nothing but a pawn in my game, just like everyone else." Alina stepped forward, her eyes locked on Dominic. "You've been using me, manipulating me. I was never your pawn. I'm done with you, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you've done." Suddenly, I heard the sound of an engine revving in the distance. My heart skipped a beat. I looked around, trying to spot the source of the noise, and then it hit me. Dominic had planned this confrontation as a distraction. He had orchestrated everything from the start. "Alina, get down!" I shouted as I lunged toward her, pulling her out of harm's way. The sound of gunfire shattered the night air, and I instinctively pushed Alina behind a nearby car for cover. Dominic wasn't alone. He had brought backup. More people, more threats. I cursed under my breath, realizing just how far Dominic was willing to go to protect himself. But I wasn't going to let him win. Not now, not ever. I pulled out my phone and quickly texted Clara, telling her to alert the authorities. The final piece of the plan was in motion. The police would be on their way. As we crouched behind the car, Dominic's men moved in, their shadows casting long, menacing figures across the ground. Dominic's voice rang out, harsh and mocking. "You're too late. This is how it ends for you, my friend." But he was wrong. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the end for him. I glanced at Alina, who was trembling but resolute. "Stay down," I whispered. "We've got this." I had no idea how we were going to get out of this, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let Dominic win. Suddenly, headlights flashed in the distance. The sound of sirens grew louder. Dominic's men froze, and in that split second, I knew this was our chance. The police arrived in full force, and the situation quickly escalated. Dominic's men attempted to flee, but they were surrounded. I watched as the authorities moved in, arresting each of them. Dominic, the man who had tried to ruin my life, was now cornered. He looked at me one last time, his eyes filled with rage and disbelief. "This isn't over," he spat, his voice thick with venom. "It is," I said, my voice calm but filled with finality. "It's over for you." As the police took Dominic into custody, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was finally over. Dominic's reign of manipulation, lies, and destruction had come to an end. But even as I watched him being led away in handcuffs, I knew there would be no easy answers to the questions that had haunted me for so long. The following weeks were a blur of legal battles, media attention, and emotional recovery. Dominic's empire crumbled as the full extent of his crimes came to light. He was arrested for fraud, conspiracy, and a series of other charges. The evidence we had uncovered was enough to ensure he would spend years behind bars. Alina, though deeply remorseful, had to face the consequences of her actions. The divorce proceedings were inevitable, and though part of me still felt a pang of sadness for what we had lost, I knew it was the only way forward. In the aftermath, I focused on rebuilding my business, reclaiming the life that Dominic had almost destroyed. It wasn't easy. The scars of the past, the lies and the betrayal would never fully fade. But I had learned something valuable throughout this ordeal. I was stronger than I had ever realized. Alina and I remained in contact, but it was clear that our relationship had been irreparably broken. There was no going back. But in the wreckage of everything I had lost, I found a new sense of purpose. My children, my business, my future, all of it was mine to rebuild. Months later, as I was looking through old papers, I stumbled upon something that made my blood run cold. A letter from Ian. It was dated just days before everything had gone down. "You've won the battle, but the war isn't over. There's always someone watching, always someone waiting to take your place. This isn't the end for you." The words felt like a warning, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't done fighting. I had faced the darkness, and I had emerged victorious. No matter what came next, I was ready.